My name is Paula Brennan and I'm from Save the Children UK. And my story this afternoon is about our recent merger with Merlin, the medical relief agency. So I'm going to go back first to 2013, when we just conducted a midterm review of our humanitarian strategy. And one of the things that came out really loud and clear for us, that we needed to do something different in our health programming. We really had an ambition to reach the places that we hadn't been able to reach previously, and we had some massive gaps in our programming when it came to the health work. But we're also a huge organization, and we're a federated organization. So we had a sense that our decision-making wasn't as quick as it could be. We could get to places much more quickly than we had done historically. And we also felt that perhaps we were a little bit too risk-averse to actually achieve what we needed to achieve. We wanted to be bolder and we wanted to be quicker when it came to our health programming. So we had this strategy, we had the ideas, we knew where the gaps were, but we didn't have any investment funding. We didn't have a pot that was going to help us move forward on this big ambition that we had in health. We knew, therefore, that it was going to be a really slow and quite a hard slog to get to where we wanted to go, and we didn't really want to wait that long. In the meantime, on the other side of London, we had Merlin, and Merlin was facing some really challenging decisions around its health programming, and it was actually running the risk of closing down programs, closing down life-saving programs that were taking care of hundreds and thousands of children. So we figured that if we did a merger with Merlin, we could actually achieve our strategic aims around our health and nutrition on the front line programming. We could also prevent some of the Merlin programs from closing, which would obviously be a huge benefit for all the people that those programs were serving. So we decided to go ahead with the merger, and in a very short period of time, we did manage to change the scale, the scope of the work that we were doing. And it was really hard. We had significant challenges, internal challenges and external challenges. On the internal front, we made a decision to do the whole thing as confidentially as we possibly could. So there was a kind of inner sanctum of people who knew what was happening and who were sworn to secrecy, and they weren't able to talk to their colleagues. I wasn't even able to talk to my colleagues about what it was that we were doing, which is particularly difficult, I think, in our sector more than any, where we demand openness, we demand transparency, and that's not the process that we decided to undertake. I think the other challenge that we had is about our organizational structure. For those of you that know Save the Children, we're 30-plus member organizations across the world. 17 of those do international programming and the rest do domestic programming. We've just been through a massive transition to get to one Save the Children and to create Save the Children International. And I think it's fair to say that there was transition fatigue. People didn't want any more change. And some of those members actually didn't do health programming, so there was no reason for them to want to support this move to kind of raise the profile of our health work. The due diligence was absolutely massive. It was a huge program, but because of the financial situation of Merlin, we had to move really, really quickly. We couldn't waste any time. So massive amounts of analysis, massive amounts of due diligence, and all still under this kind of shroud of confidentiality. So that was also quite difficult. And then I think the other thing that we struggled with a little bit was this kind of merger isn't very common within our sector, and we felt that there wasn't really a rule book, there weren't guidelines, there weren't templates, so we made it up as we went along. It's a phrase I hear a lot in Save the Children. We were building it as we were flying it. Obviously, there's a massive amount of experience from the private sector, and we did bring a lot of that in from people who were already in Save the Children or from consultants that we work with. But I think there was a little suspicion that maybe if that works for the private sector, is it really going to work for us? And then Merlin had 3,000 staff dotted around the world in a whole range of programming, some in fairly complex environments and some not so. And they were about to be transitioned into a monster organization that is very different from their own, with a massively different organizational culture. So that was another challenge in terms of how did we create that transition. but we did it. And I think despite all the challenges and despite the missteps that we made, we've landed in a very good place. And it was very quick. The changes that we saw were very, very quick after the transition happened. So one thing was we founded the Emergency Health Unit, which is a rapidly deployable set of teams that deploy within 24 to 72 hours into health emergencies. So we had that immediate kind of internal shift. I think the risk appetite within Save the Children has shifted massively. I think the fact that we chose to respond to the Ebola crisis, that was just weeks after the Merlin transition. I don't think Save the Children would have done that prior to the merger, and I don't think that Merlin would have been able to respond to the scale that we responded collectively without the platform that the Save the Children movement was able to offer. And also, I don't know how many of you know, but we have a ship in the Mediterranean that's doing search and rescue of migrants. And last year, at the end of the year, we rescued 2,700 people out of the water off Libya. That would have never happened prior to this. So a very distinct shift in the risk appetite that we had as Save the Children. Learnings, we had quite a few. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think if we did it again, we would have definitely sat down earlier collectively, Merlin and Save the Children, and together designed the strategic plan of how to make the transition both at headquarters and also across the different country programs. The main takeout that I have, though, is it's absolutely all about the people. It's all about the individuals. That won't come as any surprise to you because we talked about it yesterday in terms of emotions and people and feelings, and that's actually what change is about. And I think we prioritized too much the process, and we were really afraid of putting a foot wrong. We were scared of the reputational risk if the deal fell through. We were scared a little bit of HR policies and what we might do if we said the right thing. So I think, yeah, people before process, I think would be the way forward. I think it's really important that when we're making change, we're thinking about how people feel, and we're thinking about how we would like people to feel. And we should have been thinking a lot more earlier about the Merlin people and how they would feel transitioning into this huge organization. Incredible people made it happen, despite the things that we didn't quite do very well. And I think my takeout, always be honest and open. One of the things that we said at the very beginning when we announced the deal to staff, we talked about it as a strategic relationship, as a strategic partnership. So there were a lot of people who actually thought that that meant that Merlin would continue under the Merlin brand, but working kind of under the wing of Save the Children, which clearly that wasn't the case. So I think really direct, honest, open conversation is definitely one of the key issues. Don't make promises that you can't keep. Treat people like adults in terms of what's happening in the future, what's coming next. And yeah, just don't lose sight of the people in the process. Thank you very much.
We all know that anticipation is absolutely critical given the changing landscape of humanitarian crises. And if we are to meet the needs of affected communities as they present, this is absolutely centerpiece. However, the commitment to and the rate of change that I see in how we function across the organizations through the START network doesn't really reflect the importance of anticipation.
In late 2016, the Australian government adopted a new catchphrase to help guide its humanitarian program. It's simple enough and has already been used by many other organisations. And yet, it represents a significant change for the South Pacific region. That phrase, if not, why not? If not cash, why not?